Welcome to today's episode of Free to Lead, Journeys of Leaders, driven by passion, inspired by purpose. I'm very pleased to welcome today Dean Kilby, who's a director, scientist, he's also a coach. Dean is educated in biochemistry and microbiology. He graduated with a first-class honors degree in biotechnology and his postgraduate training in molecular medicine, protein biochemistry, and molecular cell biology. He's got scientific and clinical experience that's spanned the pharmaceutical industry, the medical communication industry, and and he's also in scientific consulting, from reversing metabolic syndrome, that's all in the microbiomes, and advancing regenerative medicine, both in Australia and internationally. And I've known Dean for a number of years. And in fact, we worked together coaching when I first started my coaching business. And our relationship grew from there. And he's just gone up and up. And without further ado, I want to welcome Dean. Welcome to Free to Lead.
Thank you, Will. Appreciate the opportunity to contribute.
Yeah. I think you have a lot to contribute in your journey. Just give us a little bit of I just said what I said, but give us a little bit of your background story, how you got to be where you are today, and then we'll talk about where you are today.
Sure. So the introduction points to the fact that I'm relatively well versed in molecules and cells. That's the world that I see. But really my commitment come from personal experiences of ill health in the family. So my brother is type 1 diabetic. My father had cancer. My mother, she ended up passing away from a hemorrhagic stroke, but mostly driven by my brother. He was 9 years senior than me, and he was a type 1 diabetic. Unfortunately, he lost his life to complications associated with that disease back in 2011. My brother didn't have a say in whether or not he had the disease and just had to deal with it. And it always struck me as concerning that so many people these days are developing type 2 diabetes, and the end stage complications just the same as type 1. But type 2 diabetes, you do have a say. But why aren't people handling it? It is reversible. You can live a normal, healthy life. It's not necessarily a progressive disease. So what's missing? And I had a real commitment and interest in what's missing and how do we inform people, educate them, empower them, and what could I contribute to that space such that people don't end up with those same kind of end stage complications that my brother experienced, because it's gut-wrenching. And then my father, he passed away from cancer, and my early academic career, I had an interest and focus in that, and then got really resigned and cynical and stepped away from it. And more recently, stepped back in and thought, you know what, I've got to give up that resignation, and there's something there for me to contribute, looking to see what is that, and carved out some innovative pathways to be able to make a difference there as well. Yeah, that's my background. And you spoke to my scientific interests. These days, I have an interest in emerging infectious diseases. Can imagine that was peaked over the past few years. My original training was in molecular virology. And then as a cell biologist, obviously regenerative medicine is really coming to the forefront. And that's a super exciting field. But most people, however, aren't well. They're sick, they're hyperinsulinemic because they eat too many carbohydrates. That can be reversed, and the education is missing. So I have a real interest in reversing metabolic dysfunction and restoring health and vitality from that perspective.
Just in layman terms, one of your avenues in Simplr Health is simply having people reduce weight healthily, and grossly overweight people losing 30, 40 kilos, and then re-educating their system to not crave what they wanted before, so they don't put that weight back on, and then they start to live a healthy life, which all contributes, I understand, to reversing for example, diabetes, right? So
yeah, exactly.
say a little bit about that part of what
Yeah, sure. So 2/3. I'm in Australia, in Sydney. 2/3 of the adult population here are at least overweight. So if you look at morbidity and mortality, what people are dying, and then people have these debilitating or incapacitating kind of end stage disease symptoms. and you ask, why did that person pass away, or why are they so incapacitated? There's some kind of diagnosis: cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes. They had a stroke. They're experiencing early stage dementia. They may have early stage cancer or osteoarthritis, joint pain, which is the leading cause of pain and disability. So that diagnosis is in and of itself not necessarily that useful at that point in time, when you consider that they've tolerated an unbelievable amount of unworkability for a really long period of time. And this might be they've gained weight, they've got achy joints, back pain, they pull back on their participation because of dysbiosis of the gut, they've got bloating and it's uncomfortable, or all of these types of symptoms. It might even be just decreased sexual vitality. People tolerate these symptoms, and what's underneath that, what's the foundation to health, is metabolic health, gut health, and cognitive health. So think of your biochemistry, and the way in which your body utilizes energy and generates energy, your gut microbiome. So your gut microbiome, you've got all these microbes in your intestines, and they are your first family. So every time you put something in your mouth, who you're feeding first are those microbes in your gut. And those microbes in your gut are very unique. There's a unique signature to them for you. So you've got to look after them. And if they get out of whack, all kinds of things happen. You get leaky gut syndrome, you cause inflammation, but microbes in your gut produce drugs. They're making molecules all the time, and those molecules can interact with your nervous system that's in your gut, and that can directly influence your brain function. Right? So then your brain function, a lot of people deal with neuroinflammation. Now, how does that manifest, or what does it present as? Well, people just struggle to wake up in the morning. They don't experience a refreshing night's sleep. There's brain fog. There's an inability to make decisions in life. They get confused easily. They try to minimize their life and pull their participation back from life to be able to just survive and handle it. If we can make sure that those three phenomena are in check and powerfully forming the foundation of our health, then I think we've got a good opportunity to decrease the symptoms, therefore the risk of a diagnosis, and significantly decrease mortality and morbidity. Now, the access to managing the foundation of health is what goes in your mouth and what comes out of your mouth, right? So there's what you're willing to commit to. And you've got to be a grown-up about this, and you've got to be mature, and you've got to develop yourself as someone who's good for their word, versus resigning yourself to, it's out of my control, there's nothing I can do about it. So you've got to grow up and develop yourself as someone who's good for their word, and then you're good for your word with regards to what goes in. And so we educate people on the nutritional science, and we also coach people to be able to learn how to manage themselves when you're committed to restoring health and vitality for a period of time, until such a time that they've developed the integrity and the discipline to not need us anymore. And it's like, Dean, don't need you anymore, kiss my skinny little ass, and I'm good for this now. And then you can go die from something other than heart disease. Get up to something bigger than yourself, piss a few people off, get assassinated. It'll be a way more interesting way to go than heart disease or type 2 diabetes. That's so beige. Everybody else is doing that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, very good. Very good. Yeah, part of your program, for those listening, is not just getting people to lose the weight and eat healthily. You actually, people lose the weight and think, oh, good, I'm good now. And you interrupt that. You say, no, you're not done yet. And to think that's your integrity, that you don't let people go until you're clear that now they're okay. So can you say a bit about what that process is? First, you get them to lose the weight. You've got a specific plan for that. But then there's that period where you're basically retraining their brain to not go back to the old habits.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
And the gut as well, as you
and the
pointed.
gut, yeah. So I call it it's a biophenomenological approach to health transformation. And you have to transform. There has to be, by the end of it, when we part ways, there's got to be a new human being there managing that body of yours. So you have a body, you are not your body. And that distinction gets more powerfully developed along the journey. to the point where you can observe your body objectively, as I would as a coach. When you step on the scales, I see a number. You don't see a number. You have an immediate internal response to that number. I don't. I see the number. So I don't have any reservations about how much weight you could lose. The individual says, oh, I only need to lose 5 kilograms. No, you only know yourself able to lose 5 kilograms. That's all you can see in your future. Quite frankly, it's pretty obvious you need to lose 30, 40, 50. We've had clients lose 96 kilograms.
Wow.
With no exercise, preserving
Yes.
all of their muscle mass. When you do it scientifically and you ensure that it's nutritionally complete, it's literally you promise to eat what we tell you to eat. Don't eat what we tell you not to eat. Write down what you eat so we know what's happening on the court, right?
Yes.
Share with people around you what you're doing and why. You'd be surprised how supportive your environment can be.
Yeah.
It doesn't serve you to always want to jump out and go ta-da at the end of it all and surprise people with how fabulous you look now. No, you need their support, right? You've got to be coachable, right? You've got to be willing to learn and be curiously engaged in the process. And it's not comfortable. It's not supposed to be transformation. And you promise to complete the journey. So losing the weight is the easy part. You just do what we say. But then when you lose the weight, we transition you to a more balanced dietary approach and then reintroduce exercise. It's not necessary for the first bit, contrary to popular belief. It really isn't. There's very little to no scientific evidence that suggests exercise is crucial for fat loss. No, it's not. It's 100% dietary. And then when we transition you, we still don't trust you with your body. So we keep you on a stabilization program that allows you to develop an awareness and the discipline required of managing yourself when there's freedom of choice.
Really?
So that's the entire process. And like you said, it's an environmental challenge that causes an adaptive reprogramming of your biology. So your metabolism resets, as you mentioned, your brain rewires, your gut microbiome reconstitutes, and your immune system resets as well.
Yeah, because I talk to people who say things like, I'm addicted to sugar. I just can't help it. And those cravings and that stuff can actually be treated in what you're talking about.
Yeah. So if someone says, I'm addicted to sugar, and so does that mean you're going to use that as an excuse now to not take action, to not commit yourself to a structure that could actually, undo that addiction? That's how we evolve. Sugar's addictive, right? So what? That all the more reason to do whatever it takes to handle that and develop yourself such that it doesn't own you anymore, where you have maybe a taste preference for sugar, but the sugar doesn't own you. How do you cause that transformation? That's what we're masterful at.
Yeah. Also, those cravings. I remember you telling me a story about they did a trial with some alcoholics, and you can tell the story what they did. They blasted them with the antibiotics, and you tell that story. That's
So this is
people an idea of how much the gut influences all of that stuff.
Totally. So they had a study group of alcoholics, and they did what's called a fecal microbiota transplant. So basically, you wipe out your gut microflora with strong antibiotics, or if you've ever had a colonoscopy and you take a pico prep before the procedure, you're on the toilet and you're just washing everything out,
including all the microbiome that we were talking about,
as much as possible. You don't
your system from all your microbiomes.
Exactly. And then they transplanted a new biome into the patient's colon, right?
So how did they do
and
that?
What happened is they just lost the urge to consume alcohol.
How did they transplant that thing in, that new microbiome?
Yes, you manufacture capsules, basically. So it's which capsules with the microbes from healthy poo, essentially, that can then help to reconstitute and repopulate your gut microflora.
Yeah.
So your gut microbiome, you pretty much inherit that predominantly from your mother. So when you're born, you get exposed to bacteria in the vaginal canal during a vaginal birth. And then from breastfeeding, you get exposed to more microbiomes. And this is what starts to populate your own gut as a baby. And your immune system kind of tolerates whatever gets introduced up until maybe 10 to 12 months of age. And then generally anything new that enters your system, it gets wiped out, right? That's why probiotics, you can't just take a probiotic and think that it's going to reconstitute your gut microbiome. It doesn't work that way. At best, if the probiotic is the right species, if it gets into your gut in the right numbers, and we're talking trillions of cells, then maybe those probiotics can help suppress the growth of the unwanted or bad or deleterious bacteria that's in there at best, until such a time that you can reorganize your diet and manage yourself with some discipline and stop eating junk food and sugar and artificial sweeteners and all this sort of stuff that damages your gut microbiome. Now, anytime you've had an antibiotic, so an antibiotic, when you take it, can you imagine if you've got an ear infection, for example?
Yes.
Got an infection there, there's some microbes that are overgrowing, they're causing inflammation, which is causing pain, and then pain behavior and suffering. So you take a drug, that drug has to get through your gastrointestinal tract in high enough concentration such that it can be absorbed into your bloodstream and then get pumped through your system and travel and arrive at the point of infection in high enough concentration to be able to kill those microbes.
Yes.
Now, if you backtrack, then the concentration that it hits your gut in, it's like an atomic bomb going off, and it leaves a bit of a desert. And because it kills a lot of susceptible bacteria, obviously. Yeah. And in that desert, that then subsequently gets repopulated by opportunistic bacteria, either from lower down in your colon and also predominantly from the foods, etc., that you eat. You can't really then, once you've had an antibiotic, get it back to the original state. It's a necessary evil. If we didn't have antibiotics, half of us wouldn't be here, but it does have that deleterious impact. And we know for neurological conditions and people with mood disorders, if you simply just do a washout of your colon, it can have dramatic effects in then how your brain begins to function. And people who are manic or depressed, or you just handle your gut microbiome in a specific way, then yeah, a lot of those symptoms can be relieved.
If we go back to the alcoholics, then so far they got blasted with these nuclear devices called antibiotics, killed all their microbiome. Then you put in those, what do you call them? Those capsules of
capsules,
right? They go in the system and then they start to populate healthy microbiome in that person. And then what happened to those alcoholics?
Yeah, they just lost the urge to consume alcohol. So it had all the rehab specialists questioning, what the heck have we been working on? We've been focused on the wrong end of the body. Yeah, it's amazing. And this is why I focus on metabolic health, gut health, and cognitive health, right? So that gut-brain axis we're learning more and more about it. The gut microbiome is super, super complex, as is the brain. But technology is advancing with genomic sequencing, next generation sequencing, et cetera. We're able to develop a map of your gut microbiome. Now, what does that mean? There's a few labs in the world that can interpret that data in such a way that where they can actually treat you appropriately. But most of these tests out there are pretty useless. You may as well just read the horoscopes in the newspaper on their predictive approach to move forward. And then there's the brain. What do you do about the brain? And we've gone from, you can measure brain activity with quantitative electroencephalography, QEEG, and that gives you a sense of parts of the brain that are active and those that are underactive. And you can use neuromodulation, like lasers into the brain, photobiomodulation therapy, PBM, or transcranial magnetic stimulation that just forces the new formation of new connections in the brain, or hyperbaric oxygen therapy. These neuromodulatory approaches, together with micro dosing of psilocybin, CBD, LSD, these mood altering drugs in combination again with cognitive behavioral therapy. Now, in the medical realm, they call this psychosurgery. And one of
Wow.
my mentors and advisors to Simplr Health is the famous Professor Joseph Maroon. He's a famous neurosurgeon. He's the team neurosurgeon for the Pittsburgh Steelers in the United States. And he is the senior vice president of the American Academy of Anti-Aging Medicine. So this guy's a phenomenon. He's in his mid-80s. He still competes in triathlons and Ironman competitions. So he's a living example of, what he preaches. And I said to him, Joe, the Simplr Health approach, we're putting people on this particular diet and we coach them, this unique kind of transformational coaching. And they're unbelievably receptive to the coaching. Once they get in, they commit to it, the coaching just seems to stick. And he said, no, you're absolutely spot on, Dean. We do it with this approach that I just detailed, and we call it psychosurgery. You've figured out how to do it just with nutrition and conversation. And when someone's in that nutritional approach and we cause those adaptive responses, their brain becomes very malleable. We increase neuroplasticity. We increase neurogenesis, which is the formation of new brain cells, basically. And the ability, when you've got more plasticity and more new brain cells to work with, the brain becomes super receptive to coaching opportunities. So if you're a leader, a business owner, or someone who's committed to innovation, you need your brain to be on point. It's not just about your ability to recall that which you already know. It's how do you create new connections with what you've already learned, and how do you receive new information and piece it together in a way that nobody has before? This is where when there's also a pressure for you to perform, this is where real creative prowess elevates. Managing your health, nutrition, understanding your physiology and how to modify it and how to hack your brain and your gut and your metabolic rate to give you the energy and the wellness and the cognitive prowess to be able to take your endeavors to a whole other level is something that I just love working with people on.
Clear, very clear. Your passion is shining through. We haven't even got to what you're doing currently, right? We haven't even got to that because you're so passionate about what you're doing. People listening guys have struggled with weight over and over for years and years. They don't just come to you to lose weight. They come to you to get reprogrammed. So they lose the weight and then it doesn't go back. It just doesn't go back. You reprogram literally their gut and brain. So it's very interesting to listen to what you're saying. And I would love to hear about what you're doing now, or as much as you can say, because it's a little bit.
Yeah, sure.
Not reveal everything what you're up to right now, but what can you tell us?
Yeah, so I have a real commitment to regenerative medicine, and this is distinct from allopathic medicine. So allopathic medicine is drugs and surgery, and this is predominantly what's wrong, can we fix it? Or what are the symptoms, can we suppress the symptoms? But what if there was an opportunity to modify the disease state, potentially reverse it, or even cure various ailments? And we're beginning to be able to do this. I helped to pioneer this in Australia, the clinical applications of regenerative medicine, stem cell therapy, for example, in treating pain disorders, treating autoimmune disease conditions, neurological disorders, post-stroke treatment, and how do you combine it with the nutritional medicine, with all the combinatorial approaches using the technology that I talked about before. And so I'm developing regenerative medicine health facilities offshore in countries like Indonesia, the Philippines, India. Recently, the president of Tanzania has expressed an interest for me to come develop similar in Zanzibar, of all places. So I'm looking forward to visiting there and having an experience of Africa. But this is bringing the world's best all together under one roof, from Japan, Australia, the US, from the technology to the clinical expertise to the creative insights of how you can bring all of these treatment modalities together in a way that treats people that are suffering now, not just give them the promise of something in 30 years' time in the hope that one day the technology will advance. Well, the technology is here. or that the regulatory environment will allow for it. Why overseas? Because these governments are making it possible for me within health-focused special economic zones that allows me to translocate different therapies that are available in different countries all in one spot. And so this is huge. I think it'll go a long way in terms of beginning the transformation of the healthcare system within these key regions. And again, a real passion of mine, and I love doing it. I get to travel and meet all kinds of people and have an impact globally. So yeah, that's, I think, a game worth giving myself to.
So just to put in, you've done a very good job, because I already had a conversation with you, so I understand what you're talking about. Somebody listening might be going, God, I'm lost. What is he up to? What are these centers? So pick one of those centers. You don't have to say what it is, because I know it's all been getting funding, and can't say too much about this and that. But if you just look at one of these centers that you're building, right? What's there? What is it?
Yeah. If you've got cancer, for example, why the cancer's developed in your body is because your immune system hasn't done its job in clearing those cancer cells out. So the cancer cells have had an ability to evade your immune system. Now, this may be because the cells that would ordinarily take care of those cancer cells and wipe them out, not in high enough numbers, or they're not activating appropriately. So the Japanese have pioneered this approach where they just take your whole blood, they isolate specific immune cells. Which immune cells? That's determined based on the genomic analysis of your tumor. And they can isolate and grow those immune cells to high enough numbers in a way where they maintain their cancer-killing properties. They activate them and then put them back into you. And after several infusions, they're your cells. There's no side effects. And the efficacy is like a 50% response rate across the board.
It's amazing. Cavalry of immune cells to attack the cancer.
Exactly.
In reinforcement, by it going out of your body, growing those appropriate cells, and then pumping them back into your body to go and fight the cancer.
Exactly. With no chemo. Now, it can be used in conjunction with chemo and radiation therapy, and even it allows, if you use this cell therapy approach, it allows the use of checkpoint inhibitor drugs, which are coming to the forefront, in much lower doses to avoid the side effects of those drugs. So that's a really innovative approach. We're bringing that technology from Japan into the environments in which I'm working overseas. That's one. Another one might be stem cells,
as we're calling them at the moment, right? But at some point, you'll be able to tell the world, hey, come here, we can treat you.
That's right. Yeah. And treat pain disorders in joints, for example, instead of opting for total joint replacement surgery. Maybe you're too young but you're in pain and the analgesics aren't strong enough and it's limiting you. What if you could just get an injection of cells that allow the reduction in pain, the improvement in joint mobility, the potential regeneration of the cartilage, and improvement in quality of life? So I'm attacking that from a couple of ways. One is creating these regenerative medicine health facilities where we can provide those procedures, but also there are some cutting edge biotech companies that are entering phase 3 clinical trials, and I'm assisting in the funding of those companies. And it's pretty obvious that they're going to receive regulatory approval within the next 2.5 years. Yeah, that's super, super exciting. Yeah.
If you were to look back at, because heading up like a founder of your own creation, right? And pulling in all these different resources to bring it all together. So if you look at your whole journey, like all of it, all your health, what would you say has been or one of your biggest challenges?
Biggest challenges.
Or you could even say one of your biggest setbacks or failures that you learned something from. It turned out.
I'm constantly dealing with myself and my own sort of perceived inadequacies, and who am I to contribute to something of this magnitude? And you hear it, you get reinforced in these crappy conversations that you play over in your head, and you hear it from your environment. It's almost like you're pulling for it. People saying, Dean, you need to focus, and Dean, you got to stay in your lane, and don't spread yourself too thin. It's for someone like myself who's committed to big things, it's frustrating because it's like, why is everyone trying to minimize my efforts? And I start questioning and doubting myself. And every day you got to G yourself back up for the game. It's not every day I wake up like, wow, let's go for it. And
Yeah.
so I think managing my own participation in the fulfillment of that vision, constantly realigning myself to that vision and what it's really about. That's something that I'm always developing, seems like I'm getting better at. But then the accountabilities expand, the game gets bigger, and then you feel like, oh, the boulder's back down the bottom of the mountain again. It's like, bloody, I thought I'd done all that work, and why am I feeling this way now? So it's a constant internal challenge and battle, and developing oneself in the skill set required to deal with that powerfully, and being humble enough to reach out and be in communication and have support and guidance and mentorship and coaching. And you need to pull on every resource you've got just to keep yourself in the game a lot of the time. So yeah, I think
That
that's
might be your advice to anybody who's struggling. Don't be on, what would you say? Don't be on your own. Get a
don't
coach.
go it alone. Don't go it alone. Yeah, absolutely. Especially for people who want to handle their health. You've got a body that's being run by this very juvenile, righteous, entitled kind of teenagey brain.
Mm.
And that's who's been running your life and trying now to handle your health and vitality and use this skin bag to make a difference in the world. You can't, you need to be able to lean on something or someone else to support you through that process, because you just can't see it all yourself. That's been one of the biggest, I think, I've always loved being in a structure to support that. And then there are times where I'm like, I don't need that anymore. I just want to get on with this. And then which is great. And then I get to a point where I'm like struggling. So yeah, you always have to be humble enough to go, all right, maybe I need some support here.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
not seeing this. What am I missing? Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Brilliant. It's clear you are driven by passion and inspired by purpose. Your purpose to heal, to make that available and break new boundaries and have breakthroughs in your scientific research. So, how would people reach out to you? There might be people listening here say, "Hey, can you help me?" Or, "Hey, what is that thing? Can I invest in that?"
Yeah, absolutely. You can reach out simpler.health, Simplr
Yes.
dot health. That's my URL. And or you
Com
can
is that? .com?
no, just .health.
Oh, okay. So simpler
Yeah.
dot health.
Yeah, it's simpler, right? You can go to deankilby.com, just my name, deankilby.com, and you can contact me that way. And yeah, investors that are interested in what I'm up to, people who have a personal interest for themselves and the innovations that I'm involved in, or they want to be able to handle their own health and vitality, and they want someone to help concierge them through the confusion of the medical system. Where do they get the kind of help that I'm talking about? How do they access those experts? That's what I do. And Simpler is an acronym, stands for the science of immunity, metabolism, performance, longevity, and regeneration. So that encompasses the areas of scientific interest that constitute who I am and what I'm about.
Brilliant. Awesome. It's been great to have you on the show today, Dean. And if you're out there, reach out to him. The man is out to make a real difference in people's health. So thank you so much for being on the show. Thank you, Dean.
For having me.
You're
Cheers,
welcome.
Will.
So interesting. Thank you.